Good evening and welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. In British Columbia, Wet'suwet'en activists have set up more blockades in the Coastal GasLink pipeline dispute. Last month, more than 30 people were arrested by RCMP who were forcing an injunction that allows the pipeline company to operate in the area. APTN's Lee Wilson reports.
On Sunday, the Wet'suwet'en clan activists and supporters blockaded access to a Coastal GasLink drill site. In a press release, the Gidimt'en Access Point say they're upholding Wet'suwet'en law by carrying out a 2020 eviction notice to CGL from the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs. The drill site blockade is known as Coyote Camp, and it was one of the sites of 30 arrests last month, including a photojournalist and documentary filmmaker. We contacted the Gidimt'en Access Point for an interview, but did not hear back before airtime. On Monday, the natural gas pipeline builder Coastal GasLink issued a statement calling the actions unlawful. Coastal GasLink is increasingly concerned about the safety of our workforce and the public following this escalation in unlawful and dangerous activities by opponents that have put people, property, and the environment at risk. We will continue to follow this developing story. Lee Wilson, APTN National News, Kitimat.
Ontario's Court of Appeal has ruled in a case involving the 1492 Landback Lane camp in Caledonia, and it overturns an injunction and brought more good news to the group's spokesperson. Brett Forster has been following the latest developments and joins us now. All right, Brett, thanks for joining us here. What exactly did the court decide?
Thanks, Daryl. So the Ontario Court of Appeal ruled here to overturn or cancel a permanent injunction that was handed down in October 2020. The court also decided to overturn a cost award of more than $168,000 against Skylar Williams, the spokesperson for the 1492 Landback Lane camp in Caledonia. And the reason for this was essentially that Williams was denied what's called procedural fairness. In other words, the court didn't give him a fair shake. He was self-represented in these proceedings, but the court decided to rule on its own motion that Mr. Williams was in contempt of court and therefore his filings could not be accepted. They were all struck from the record. Williams appealed that ruling and he is successful today.
So what has been the reaction to this ruling?
Well, I wasn't able to get in touch directly with Skylar Williams for reaction. However, he did post a positive statement thanking his supporters and the group's supporters to Facebook. I imagine they are all celebrating right now. I did reach out to Foxgate Developments, the respondent in the appeal, but the plaintiff in the injunction motion, and they actually welcomed the decision. They disagreed with parts of it, but a spokesperson told me that both they and Skylar Williams were trying to get the government involved, and that's what they hope this does here. They point out that they never wanted to strike Skylar Williams' material from the proceedings, that this was done solely by the judge, and they're hoping again to get some movement from the government.
All right, Brett, so where do things go from here from a legal standpoint?
So there's a couple options on what can happen next. It can go back to another hearing in the Ontario Superior Court with a new judge presiding over it. A couple reasons why that might not happen. For one, the developer has already canceled the build, so that might make another injunction hearing moot. But they can also relitigate the costs and reapportion those and give Skylar Williams a new hearing. Another option is for the respondent Foxgate to appeal further to the Supreme Court of Canada. Their comments today suggest they won't do it, or they could drop it altogether. So we'll have to watch and see.
Now, Brett, First Nations rarely succeed in overturning injunctions like this one. So what could the broader significance be for other land defenses?
Well, it's a great question, and it's certainly something to think about as we watch for maybe some legal analyses of this ruling in the coming days. It's important to remember that this was all about the rule of law, and what we see here in this ruling is that in his perhaps zeal to enforce or establish the colonial rule of law, the judge here ignored it. So there's quite a bit to pick apart here, but the takeaway here is that he may not have liked Schuyler Williams' tactics or his conduct, but nevertheless, Mr. Williams was entitled to a fair shake. He was entitled to his day in court, and he did not get that here.
All right, Brett, thanks for this update. Always appreciated.
Thanks.
We want to hear what you think about Ontario's Court of Appeal overturning the injunction. Here's how to continue the conversation. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca or leave a comment on aptnnews.ca. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. The establishment of parks in Canada has often meant the removal of Indigenous people from their homelands. But in the case of the Caledonia First Nation, they are making sure their inherent rights are upheld in the Northwest Territories' newest park. Our reporter Charlotte Moore-Jacobs brings you that story from Caledonia.
And Caledonia, in essence, is this entire community because it encompasses all of our stories, all of our traditional teachings, you know, all of the different areas where we've learned to hunt, to trap, to fish, to navigate.
At Caledonia head office in Little Cay, Northwest Territories, manager Iris Catholic is hard at work. She's overseeing day-to-day implementation of a uniquely co-governed 26,000 square kilometer protected area.
Under Treaty 8 and Section 35 and being Dennis O'Flina are always first and foremost the most important thing. So, you know, I know in different parks and different places, people are not allowed to hunt, people are not allowed to make a fire, people are not allowed to, I don't know, fish, things like that. But as long as you're Dene or Inuit, and you know you have the status to practice those things that are within your treaties, you can do that within our park.
I am extremely pleased to be able to welcome you all on the very first day of its creation to Caledonia.
In 2019, after decades of negotiations and planning, Caledonia, or Land of the Ancestors, became a permanently protected area. It's jointly governed by the federal, territorial, and Little Cay Dene First Nation, who assert their rights through their presence and activities on the land and water.
We've always been taught to live in both worlds, both in the academic world as well as in the traditional world, and to always maintain our traditions.
Catholic and her staff are also developing the Nihani Dene, locals who act as stewards for the park. The group monitors wildlife in the park and ensures guests are following protocol. Chase Lockhart is the youngest of the Nihani.
For whatever we get, we share with the community, so it blocks off, so he runs right into here.
Someone who Catholic says is learning to tell his own story.
He's had a lot more exposure, you know, attending meetings and workshops with not only with our members but outside of Little Cay, that you see them coming out of their shell.
Catholic says this winter they are building cabins to expand the park staff's ability to stay on the land for extended periods of time.
The location of Pikes Portage is the main vein, the main travel routes for hunters and harvesters to go up to our traditional hunting grounds. So anybody that goes up that route has to come down that route. So that will be our Nihani Dene Guardians check-in station.
Charlotte Moore-Jacobs, APTN National News, Little Cay.
All right, we need to take a short break, but still to come, a look back at some of our top stories from Nunavut this past year. Welcome back to APTN National News. Nunavut residents have faced an awful lot over the last 12 months. From political turnover to political protest, the territory has seen some firsts this year. Some of those firsts were momentous, while others residents would rather forget. Here's our Kent Driscoll with a look at the year that was in Nunavut.
2021 began much the way 2020 ended here in Nunavut, with COVID-19 taking up a lot of the space in the room. In particular, the room behind me, the Nunavut Legislative Assembly.
Here's the neat part. These press conferences were broadcast live on the Legislative Assembly's television feed, so they were seen in real time territory-wide. Then an interesting thing started to happen. Viewers started sending reporters their own questions or information contrary to what the government was saying in real time. Here's a great example. I'd been getting notes from teachers territory-wide about how the learning packages the schools sent home during COVID closures weren't even being marked. So I asked the education minister about it. The teachers, when they put out the packages, were asked to focus on numbers and letters, numeracy and literacy, the basics. But they're being asked to grade these report cards full of subjects that they've barely taught and even in the last semester have taught remotely. How can these report cards be any sort of meaningful guide for parents if they're being graded on such small amounts of material?
Minister Joanna Seda,
just to build off the experience that we've had, and yes, we are focusing on and emphasizing literacy, numeracy, as well as the well-being of our students. This is where our teachers know their students the best, and this is where our education system has to meet the students where they're at.
It wasn't all bad news for Nunavut students. COVID vaccines were rolled out for teenagers in the summer and for everyone 5 and up by the end of the year.
This year also brought us a protest movement unlike anything ever seen in Nunavut before. The Mary River iron ore mine is located halfway in between Pond Inlet and Arctic Bay, Nunavut.
Protesters traveled to the mine by snowmobile and blocked the runway and access road, right in the middle of the Nunavut Impact Review Board meeting in Pond Inlet about the mine's proposed expansion. They held out for a week until a Nunavut judge issued an injunction. The decision about the mine is now in Ottawa's hands. The Impact Review Board will make a recommendation to the federal cabinet, who can accept or reject it. This story will be coming back in 2022. You can count on it.
2021 was also a big year for political change here in Nunavut, and much of that change came from people who were heavily involved in that Mary River iron ore mine project.
Lori Idlout was the lawyer for the protesters. Now she's the NDP MP for Nunavut. She replaced Mumilak Kakak, who decided not to run for a second term. Kakak did release a scathing report into Nunavut's housing problems. Her methods were questioned by Nunavut's old guard politicians, but she stood firm.
Because a lot of people were quite, to put it bluntly, very angry with me for not following GN process and procedure. I don't work for the GN. I don't work for the Housing Corporation. I don't work for NTI. I work for the constituents. I have no obligation to go through any proper policy and procedure.
Another big shift in the political landscape was late in the year, when former QIA President PJ Akiokok defeated incumbent Premier Joseph Ikita to become Premier of Nunavut. QIA is the regional Inuit association. They're also basically the landlord for the Mary River iron ore project. After years of backing Mary River, Akiokok and QIA moved off that position as the protests mounted. Then he resigned to run for the Legislative Assembly. This is a kagiak, a massive igloo designed to host a meeting or party. Kagiavut is a Nunavut group that advocates for a performance space for Inuit performers. They built this to give us a break from the constant COVID reminders and to remind us that Nunavut still doesn't have a performing arts center.
Bringing awareness to what we really need here. Kagiavut's been advocating for an actual, real performing arts center in Nunavut, and I hope that this helps bring out the issue.
Mary Simon was selected this year as the first Inuk to hold the role of Governor General and has been using Inuktitut on the job frequently. Simon isn't from Nunavut, but the Inuktitut's being heard loud and clear Just ask Nunavut's language commissioner.
She spoke in Inuktitut first. She's very proud of her language, and we even saw in the media coverage of having, I believe, 8 additional Indigenous languages that were broadcasted today, including in the Inuit language. So she's already shone a brighter light on not only the Inuit language, but Indigenous languages.
Leaving the world of politics and back to the basics, on October 12th, Iqaluit residents found out we can't drink the tap water. And for 60 long days, we couldn't.
This fuel tank was the culprit. It was lodged underground next to the city's water filtration plant. Fuel from the tank got into the system, making the water toxic enough that you couldn't boil the problem away. For the next 2 months, the armed forces fought the elements to try and provide water. They were successful for 13 days in total. The government of Nunavut flew in bottled water, and that was Iqaluit residents' drinking water for 2 months. As for the tank, it was buried there in 1995. No one knows why, including Iqaluit's mayor.
It was buried, it was cemented over. There was a staircase. There was, 3 feet of earth put over it to be never found again. How does that make any sense?
In 2022, we're still going to be trying to make sense of why that tank was buried next to the water supply. We're still going to be hearing about the Mary River iron ore mine, as the federal cabinet will have to make a decision about the expansion. And we're still going to be hearing about COVID-19. 2022 looks like it'll be a lot like 2021, for good or ill. Ken Driscoll, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
Thanks so much for that, Kent. Now, Inuit living in Manitoba will have a chance to taste their country foods thanks to a new hamper program. The Manitoba Inuit Association launched the program when COVID hit. Our reporter Michelle Karlenzig takes us inside for a closer look.
Dolly Tinashalu misses country food from her hometown, Nauyat, Nunavut. The 65-year-old Inuk now lives in Winnipeg, and thanks to an Inuit hamper program, she gets a taste of home.
I get Arctic char, caribou, and makta. Makta is
whale.
Yeah.
Manitoba Inuit Association started the hamper program when the pandemic hit, providing essentials like food and toiletries to Inuks in the province. Janelle Samertuck is the program coordinator.
They're really struggling right now. Especially we saw with COVID, people lost their jobs and they didn't really have anything. So we thought this was the best way that we could help them.
The program has helped people like Tinashalu and her husband Nelson. They used to present Inuit culture in schools, but then COVID-19 shut down that income. Nelson says the Inuit Association helps with more than just food delivery.
If we have problems, we can go to them. And they have the resources. They know where to send us, direct us in the right ways and stuff like that.
Samertuck says the feedback from the hamper program has been positive and enjoys helping families in need.
To me, it's really empowering to be able to help my community, to know that there's a lot of people out there struggling and that we're able to give them just something to even go through a few weeks and have food.
The association relies on funding from Indigenous Services Canada. Samertuck says as long as COVID continues and they receive funding, the hamper program will continue. Michelle Karlenzig, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
We need to take one more break, but still ahead, we'll have a preview of tonight's face-to-face episode. Stick around. Welcome back. Some sad news now from Ontario. Indigenous women's rights advocate Yvonne Bedard has died. Bedard was from 6 Nations of the Grand River. She was one of the first Indigenous women to challenge gender discrimination in the Indian Act after she lost her status through marriage. Her case was merged with one by Jeanette Corbière-Laval. It went on to the Supreme Court of Canada but was dismissed in 1973. Bedard is remembered as one of a group of 6 women who eventually got gender discrimination removed from the Act. Our condolences to Bedard's family and friends. People from all over the world travel to Banff to take in the Rockies, but not many know the famous park is part of the Stoney Nakoda territory. The nation recently unveiled a multi-sensory experience at the Banff Gondola that showcases the Nakota Sioux culture. Tamara Pimentel was there. Here's an encore presentation of this beautifully shot story.
Top of Sulphur Mountain. When the sun goes down, Sulphur Mountain in Banff lights up, creating an immersive Stoney Nakoda experience with night rise. On the gondola ride up, you can hear the stories passed down by elders and narrated by Cherith Mark.
This project started off with elders discussing and telling us what the mountains mean to them.
At the top of the mountain, visitors can see the Stoney language.
Our Stoney winter moons are represented here because in Stoney Nakoda calendar, winter lasts about seven moons. I believe this is a great opportunity for visitors and guests to hear the sound and the language of the area.
It's a collaboration with Pursuit, Moment Factory, and the Stoney Nation. Kristen Ryder with the Nation says it's the first time the Nakota Sioux are showcased here.
You may visit Banff and then not really know whose traditional territory you're on. So this is really important for us because a lot of people come up here to the gondola to experience. But this is really special because it's at night.
Light shows, bonfires, and stories light up the mountain. But that music you hear, it's produced by Stoney's Anders Hunter.
My role in today's day and age is to keep the traditional songs and the social songs strong and alive. I think when they hear the music and the sounds and the voices and everything that's been put together, it's going to be a memory that they'll never forget for sure.
The Night Rise experience is running now until March 12th. Ryder says it brings community pride and gives a voice to the people who call this land home.
So it's special, and I'm glad that we're involved and we can say, hey, we've been here for a very long time. Our people have been here, we've gathered here, we've picked medicines here. These are our traditional lands.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Banff.
Tonight marks the last episode of Face to Face in 2021. I sit down with recording artist and music producer Matt Mack. Matt is from Garden Hill First Nation, a remote fly-in community in northern Manitoba, and he has been blind since birth. He first began to make beats and write songs when he was just 13 years old. Music has helped him overcome hardships, including depression. Here's a sneak peek at tonight's episode.
There are a couple things that I talk about in my music that I'm going through, like, personally. Whether I'm talking about isolation or being stuck in your head or overthinking. It's just a lot of that. For me, it's it helped just to talk about these things. So it's an outlet for me, for sure.
That's all we have for you tonight. Don't touch that dial. Face to Face starts right now. I'm Daryl Stranger. Thank you for joining us and have a great night.